I felt something was amiss the instant I saw two homeowners association security officers breach my gate at 2 in the morning. One was recording my garage with his device. The other was measuring my driveway as if they were preparing to seize it. And all I could contemplate was, you gentlemen have simply selected the wrong rancher. 10 days afterward, those same individuals found themselves in restraints at my gate. If there's one truth you absorb from solitary life on a ranch for over a decade, it's this: your land communicates with you. Not through spoken words, no, but through subtle indications, minor alterations, things out of their usual order, and if you remain observant for a sufficient period, you begin to discern the distinction between what is natural and what is deliberately placed. That morning, the land was endeavoring to convey a message to me. The sun had barely crested the ridge when I emerged onto my veranda with a steaming mug of black coffee. It was the identical ritual I had maintained for years. The air was crisp, pure, the kind that instills a profound sense of gratitude for mere existence. Daisy, my seasoned healer dog, settled beside me, her ears alert, as if anticipating the dawn to offer its discourse. As I ambled down towards the gate, I observed their tracks, recent imprints, carving a distinct path across the fine grid of my private access. They weren't mine, nor Hank's truck, nor the delivery drivers, nor any of the local ranchers. Ranch dwellers leave a particular imprint: narrower tire patterns, earth embedded deeply in the treads, a slight waver indicative of worn suspension. These tracks were anomalous. I knelt, feeling the gravel, still loose from the weight that had pressed upon it. These weren't from the previous night. These were from the pre-dawn hours, perhaps an hour before my awakening, and for the first time that day, a knot tightened in my stomach. You see, I'm not an overly suspicious individual. I've resided on this property long enough to recognize that people sometimes stray from the intended path, particularly when their navigation devices falter in these hills. However, even a faulty GPS doesn't account for why the tracks veered towards my gate, decelerated, and then circled back out. Whoever traversed my drive wasn't merely lost. They were searching. I lowered myself further to examine the tread marks. Broad, deep, aggressive, likely 33-inch all-terrain tires, excessively clean, devoid of any sidewall scuffs, tires meant for pavement cruising, projecting an air of dominance but signifying minimal actual utility, certainly not those of a ranch vehicle, not even remotely. I rose slowly and allowed my gaze to follow the winding contour of my private road as it meandered back towards the valley. Far down the incline, obscured by the shimmering heat distortion, lay Larkspur Hills, one of those enclaves governed by a homeowners association, where every residence appears to have been mass-produced. Painted fences, meticulously maintained lawns, individuals who become incensed if your refuse receptacle is even an inch misaligned. Their domain concludes at the base of the hill. Mine commences there, explicitly defined as such in the county's official records. So, what on earth were their tires doing so far up here? I took a protracted draught of coffee, allowing the sharp flavor to settle as I re-examined the ground. Daisy explored along the fence line, her tail held rigidly, a sign she exhibits when something has intruded where it does not belong. That disquiet in my gut intensified, yet I maintained my composure, refraining from any outburst, resisting the urge to hurl the coffee mug across the yard. I simply exhaled slowly and steadily, a practiced technique of a former law enforcement officer when a complex problem begins to take shape. Because a few hours later, upon reviewing the trail camera footage, that's when the unfolding situation transformed into a clear warning. There it was, indisputably visible, a white sport utility vehicle progressing at a leisurely pace up my private lane. Larkspur Hills HOA patrol was emblazoned clearly across its door. Not official law enforcement, not county personnel, not any entity with jurisdiction beyond their own manicured sidewalks. Merely a homeowners association patrol vehicle inching its way onto my property as if it held ownership. I did not slam the desk or curse the heavens. That is not the nature of the indignation I harbor. My anger is reserved, frigid, and intensely focused. I leaned back, fixating on the paused image, and murmured under my breath, "So, That's how this is going to transpire. Because believe me, that day was merely the commencement, and those individuals within that sport utility vehicle had just initiated a conflict for which they were wholly unprepared. The nature of adversity is that it rarely arrives in its entirety. It probes the entrance first, inspects your windows, circulates the perimeter a few times to ascertain if you are paying heed. And for a couple of days, I anticipated those tire tracks would evolve into something tangible, some logical explanation, a neighbor dropping by, a misplaced delivery, anything ordinary. But deep down, I harbored a profound certainty, for 2 nights after I first noticed those tracks, the land communicated once more. And this time, it did not whisper. It was just past midnight when the motion sensor alert vibrated on my mobile device. Now out here, nocturnal alerts are not an uncommon occurrence. Deer meander through. Coyotes occasionally appear. Once in a while, a local canine ventures too far afield. However, the alert was not from the lower field or the rear boundary. It originated from gate camera 1, positioned directly towards the access panel. My apprehension intensified. Daisy lifted her head from the foot of the bed, her ears pointing forward. She sensed it as well. I disengaged myself from the bed, retrieved my phone, and accessed the live feed. And there it was, confronting me directly. A white sport utility vehicle, the identical one from earlier. Its headlights were extinguished, but the faint illumination from the dashboard sufficiently lit the interior to reveal movement. 2 figures, both male, both attired in dark uniforms bearing reflective insignia on their sleeves. Not sheriff's deputies, not county employees. No recognizable governmental insignia. Merely that homeowners association emblem once again, the one that strove too strenuously to project an air of officialdom. The sport utility vehicle advanced until it was mere inches from the gate. Then the passenger alighted. He did not survey his surroundings, nor did he exhibit any hesitation. He proceeded directly to the keypad as if he had performed the action countless times before. And then the gate unlocked. No force, no tampering, no electrical discharge, just a crisp beep, and the gate smoothly retracted. Good heavens, I muttered under my breath. There exists a peculiar brand of indignation that surfaces when an individual transgresses a boundary they are acutely aware they have no right to cross, not out of curiosity, not by accident, but by deliberate choice. The passenger held the gate open while the driver cautiously maneuvered the sport utility vehicle inside. As it closed behind them, the camera captured an additional detail, the glint of a card in the passenger's hand, a code, an access code for my gate. Someone had either divulged it to them or they had obtained it through other means. I remained seated, gazing at the screen, my jaw clenched. Retirement had indeed tempered my disposition, certainly, but old instincts never truly vanish. When an intruder breaches your perimeter, the badge you once wore begins to feel a familiar weight upon your skin once more. The sport utility vehicle halted midway up the driveway. Both occupants disembarked. One carried a flashlight and a recording device. The other held what appeared to be a measuring wheel, one of those lengthy rolling instruments employed by surveyors. The camera meticulously documented their actions, every detail rendered sharply in the infrared illumination. The individual with the flashlight directed its beam towards my garage, capturing images as if meticulously documenting a crime scene. The other rolled the measuring wheel across the gravel, articulating numerical values under his breath. Then the microphone registered a phrase that sent a chill down my spine. Gradients are off. Likely non-compliant. Non-compliant. Homeowners Association terminology. Regulatory jargon. Language that presages a deliberate effort to make my existence a bureaucratic nightmare. I paused the feed and captured screenshots of their visages. I zoomed in. Perfectly clear. A portly gentleman, a close-cropped haircut, a chest puffed out as if he habitually practiced projecting an authoritative demeanor in reflective surfaces. The second individual. Thin-framed spectacles, tremulous hands, yet his eyes darted with the acuity of someone who genuinely believed in the righteousness of his mission. Homeowners Association. True believers represent the most formidable adversaries. They do not perceive themselves as intruders. They believe they are rectifying an anomaly. I saved all pertinent data, video recordings, audio captures, still images, meticulously organized into files precisely as I would have done when I was actively engaged in investigative work. Then I performed an action I had not undertaken in a considerable duration. I donned my denim trousers, laced up my sturdy boots, and stepped out into the cool night air. I did not proceed to confront them. Not at that juncture. Such an action would have played directly into their hands, an enraged rancher exhibiting an outburst that they could readily distort into a threat. No, I observed from the concealment of the shadows, maintaining a substantial distance, allowing them to inadvertently amass further incriminating evidence. They occupied my property for a full 15 minutes, meticulously measuring, recording, conversing, as though they were compiling a report for some higher authority. Ultimately, they departed with the same placid demeanor they had exhibited upon arrival. They utilized the keypad once more, drove away, the gate closing behind them, silently, impeccably, methodically. And it was at that moment I realized this was no mere curiosity. This was not an oversight. This signified the inception of a coordinated endeavor. I returned to the porch, Daisy trotting faithfully by my side, and surveyed the darkened hills. "This is going to escalate," I whispered. And it will escalate significantly because by the time the sun rose, I already had a flash drive in my possession and a clear destination in mind, the sheriff's department. By the time the sky began to tinge with gray, I was already en route, piloting the old Ford F-250 towards town. The flash drive rested in the console's cup holder, and I found myself glancing at it more frequently than the road ahead. A behavior entirely uncharacteristic for me. Seasoned deputies are cautioned against distractions. However, that small plastic stick contained evidence of something I couldn't yet fully articulate. Something unequivocally deliberate. Daisy rested her nose against the cracked window pane, her eyes scanning the unfolding panorama with her customary vigilance. Canines possess an innate understanding when their human companions are carrying a significant burden. She offered no wag of her tail, no yawn, simply observed the horizon. The sheriff's department remained outwardly unchanged in the 10 years since I relinquished my badge. The identical brick edifice, the same drooping flagpole that groaned with each gust of wind, the same parking area populated with dusty pickup trucks and a single patrol car that had likely required a replacement transmission a year prior. I silenced the engine, exited the vehicle, and stretched my back. That familiar ache radiated down my left hip, the one stabilized by a titanium screw, a memento from my final year on the force. Some souvenirs are not to be discarded. Within the building, the air was redolent with the aroma of stale coffee and accumulated paperwork. A young deputy I did not recognize looked up from the front desk. Youthful countenance, excessively neat attire, eyes brimming with an almost unnerving enthusiasm. I had observed similar individuals falter and burn out rapidly. "Good morning," he stated. "How may I assist you?" I nodded. "I'm here to see Harland. Inform him Flynn has arrived." His eyebrows arched slightly. "Milo Flynn. That's my understanding," I replied. He disappeared into the back, and within 10 seconds, Sheriff Harland emerged from his office. He had visibly aged since our last encounter. More lines etched around his eyes, a less sprightly gait. Yet he was unequivocally Harland, still possessing that inherent solidity. "Mo," he greeted, a smile forming as he embraced me in a brief, one-armed clasp. "Well, son, I haven't seen you in months. What brings you in today?" My smile did not reciprocate his. Harland perceived it immediately. His expression shifted to that familiar look he adopted during late-night calls when a concerned citizen reported a disturbance. "All right," he said, his voice low. "Let's head to my office." The instant the door sealed behind us, I placed the flash drive on his desk. "What's this?" he inquired. "Press play," I instructed. He inserted the drive, clicked on the initial file, and froze. The footage of the HOA sport utility vehicle scrolled silently across the screen. Harlan leaned forward, his gaze intensifying. When the two patrol officers exited and proceeded to unlock my gate using a code, he muttered, "You've got to be kidding me." I shook my head. Not at all. He replayed the segment where they traversed my property, measuring, recording, murmuring about non-compliant gradients. He viewed the entire sequence twice, once as a friend, and then again as a law enforcement professional. When the video concluded, he turned to me with an expression I hadn't witnessed since our days patrolling together. "That's the Larkspur Hills Patrol," he stated. "They're HOA, not law enforcement. They possess absolutely no authority beyond their designated boundary." "I'm aware," I confirmed. He rubbed his forehead. "What in the world are they doing on your land? And how did they acquire your gate code?" "That," I replied, "is precisely what I was hoping you could help me ascertain." Harlan exhaled a prolonged breath. Not in anger, but weariness. The kind of fatigue men experience after rectifying an excessive number of predicaments caused by individuals who crave authority but are incapable of managing its absence. "You did the right thing by bringing this in," he said. "I will file an official incident report. Would you be willing to provide me with a printed copy of everything, including written statements?" I reached into my jacket, withdrew a typed affidavit, signed and dated. "Already done." Harlan chuckled, shaking his head. "You never stopped being a cop, did you?" "No," I replied. "I simply stopped receiving payment for it." He nodded slowly. "I'll initiate the necessary paperwork and I'll speak with their board president. Occasionally, these HOA individuals tend to overstep their bounds." I settled back into the chair. "Harlan, this doesn't feel like overstepping. This feels calculated." He did not argue, nor did he dismiss my concerns, nor did he suggest I was overreacting. He simply sat there, fixated on the paused image of those two men on my property. "Milo," he said finally, "I'll monitor this situation closely, but I advise you to do the same. Those HOA types, they typically don't cease their actions after issuing a preliminary warning." I stood, extending my hand. I anticipated as much. As I stepped back out into the morning air, Daisy hopped back into the truck, her tail giving a single approving flick as if endorsing the meeting. I glanced skyward at the vast, pale and tranquil expanse, and for a fleeting moment I allowed myself to entertain the notion that perhaps Harlan was correct. Perhaps the sheriff's intervention would de-escalate the situation. But as I drove back towards my ranch, the road winding through the hills like a prolonged scar, an unsettling sensation persisted, a premonition I had learned to trust implicitly. This was far from over. In fact, it had barely begun. By the time I reached the crest of the hill, the sun had ascended sufficiently to burn away the lingering chill of the night from the surrounding pines. Daisy disembarked from the truck and trotted ahead, her tail held high once more. Animals, for the most part, forget adversity more readily than humans. A fortunate trait. I wish I possessed such a capacity. I approached the gate to conduct a thorough inspection. The hinges, the lock, the keypad, everything appeared intact. No damage, no scratches, no visible signs of forced entry, which paradoxically amplified my unease. They hadn't broken in. They had gained access through legitimate means, efficiently, silently, deliberately. I spent the remainder of the morning tightening bolts along the northern fence line. Anything to keep my hands occupied while my mind continually replayed the recorded footage. I knew Harlan would make inquiries, complete the requisite documentation, perhaps even engage in dialogue with an individual at the HOA offices. He would fulfill his professional obligations. However, deep within, I also understood the mindset of these HOA representatives. They do not respond to advisories. They react to established boundaries, either those they intend to obliterate or those they aim to control. And sure enough, later that afternoon, as I made my way back towards the porch, something captured my attention. A white envelope secured with a zip tie to my gate. HOA representatives have a particular fondness for two things: laminated signage and elaborate stationery. This particular envelope exuded both of those aesthetics. I severed the zip tie, turned it over, and the embossed seal on its front caused my stomach to clench. Larkspur Hills Homeowners Association Community Safety Committee. The very title suggested officialdom, yet one recalled it was merely a cadre of board members with an abundance of leisure time and a dearth of substantive authority. I did not open it immediately, a deeply ingrained habit. The primary directive from my tenure in law enforcement: always survey the immediate vicinity before disturbing any potential evidence. I completed a deliberate circuit around the gate. As anticipated, fresh boot impressions, 2 distinct sets again, recent tire markings near the turnoff point, exhibiting the identical tread pattern from before. They had not entered the enclosed area this time, but they had positioned themselves close enough to convey a deliberate message. I finally sliced the envelope open with my pocket knife. The letter contained within was printed on heavy cardstock, the kind typically utilized for wedding invitations or legal documents intended to be taken with utmost seriousness. I unfolded it and read, Mr. Flynn, the Larkspur Hills Homeowners Association has received numerous reports from the community concerning the safety, visibility, and adherence to regulations of the thoroughfare designated as Flynn Private Drive. Given its proximity to Larkspur Hills and its frequent utilization by community visitors and emergency services, this road falls under the extended purview and scrutiny of the HOA. Our safety committee has concluded that the road fails to meet established standards for gradient and drainage. The HOA will commence assessment and compliance modifications within 30 days from the date of this notification. Kindly ensure unrestricted access for inspectors and contractors. Refusal to cooperate may result in a formal complaint filed with the county. I read it twice, deliberately, then a third time to ensure I wasn't experiencing a medical event. Extended HOA interest, compliance modifications, unrestricted access. This was not a request, it was a pronouncement. They were informing me they intended to implement improvements to my private road without my consent, as if it were some common cul-de-sac under their dominion, and I, in turn, was somehow trespassing every time I returned home. I emitted a laugh, not one of amusement, the kind of sound a man makes when someone attempts to pilfer the very footwear he is wearing. I carried the letter into the barn's office, laid it flat, and captured photographic evidence of every page, both front and back, meticulously documenting it as proof. Never entrust a paper trail to another, construct it yourself. Subsequently, I forwarded all the pertinent information to Rachel. Rachel Lyman was not merely an attorney, she was the kind of individual who derived considerable satisfaction from dismantling poorly constructed threats, as sharp as fractured glass and twice as hazardous. It took her precisely 10 minutes to contact me. Milo, she stated, her voice already tinged with palpable irritation. They have demonstrably lost their collective minds. That's my assessment as well, I concurred. That road is legally yours. It's documented by deed, a separate parcel designation outside their overarching district. They cannot even approach that fence line without risking legal repercussions. Well, I responded, they appear remarkably eager to test that very premise. Oh, they will spectacularly fail, I assure you, she declared. I am currently drafting a cease and desist order and a formal notification of jurisdictional absence. The moment they set foot on your property beyond that gate again, we will dismantle them piece by meticulous piece. I nodded, though she was unable to observe the gesture. Upon concluding our call, I proceeded to replace every aging no trespassing sign along the property perimeter. I erected new ones, more conspicuously colored, installed an additional 2 trail cameras, fitted fresh batteries into the motion sensors, and further reinforced the gate's locking mechanism. If they were intent on initiating a conflict, I certainly was not inclined to cede even an inch of ground. However, even then, even after the phone calls, the signage, and the surveillance equipment, I possessed no inkling of the extreme lengths to which the HOA was prepared to escalate. Not yet. That profound revelation would manifest in the form of another correspondence, one significantly more egregious. and it would arrive in less than 48 hours. Rachel dispatched the cease and desist notice that very afternoon. It was sharp, precise, and as frigid as a bucket of icy water. She ensured the entire HOA board, the property manager, and even the county clerk were included in the distribution, simply for the sake of adding an extra layer of emphasis. Rachel harbored no belief in half measures. If you desired a definitive boundary established, she carved a veritable trench. For a day or two, an unnerving quiet descended, almost too profound to be natural. No sport utility vehicles stealthily ascending the hill, no motion alerts, no fresh boot impressions. Even Daisy exhibited a noticeable degree of relaxation, sprawling languidly beneath the porch, as if embodying the regal matriarch of the ranch she undoubtedly perceived herself to be. However, genuine adversity, the truly pernicious kind, does not simply vanish. It reloads and reappears. And it returned precisely 48 hours later. The late morning sun was reflecting brilliantly off the gate when I observed something decidedly out of place. Another white envelope. This one, however, was not secured with a zip tie. It was meticulously wedged into the bars of the gate, as if someone had deliberately intended for me to retrieve it the instant I stepped outside, which fortunately for them I did. The cardstock felt even more substantial than the previous instance, as if they were intent on demonstrating their capacity for wasteful expenditure. The embossed seal remained identical. Larkspur Hills, HOA. However, the return address printed in the corner had undergone a modification. This time it read, Community Safety Board, Karen West, Chairwoman. Ah, so there she was, the esteemed matriarch herself, finally emerging from the clandestine shadows. I carried the envelope into the barn's office. I did not rush the process, nor did I resort to expletives. I simply settled into my chair, retrieved my utility knife, sliced cleanly through the seal, and unfolded the letter. What I proceeded to read next caused my eyebrows to ascend with such rapidity I am convinced I heard them audibly pop. Mr. Flynn, it has come to our attention that you have steadfastly refused multiple attempts by the Larkspur Hills Safety Board to conduct a mandatory road inspection on Flynn Drive. Your lack of cooperation constitutes an obstruction of community governance and may potentially endanger residents and emergency personnel. Therefore, the Larkspur Hills HOA hereby formally notifies you of a mandatory compliance inspection scheduled to occur within the ensuing 7 days. Our designated inspectors are fully authorized to enter the premises for the purpose of measurement, documentation, and evaluation. Authorized by whom? Their committee, their gardening club, their shared online forum? I continued reading. Failure to grant unimpeded and secure passage will necessitate the involvement of county officials. I let out a bark of laughter, not from amusement, but from the sheer, almost artistic level of their absurdity. County officials, the very same ones who were already in possession of Rachel's correspondence and Harlan's detailed findings. This was the hallmark of arrogance, the kind that flourishes in individuals who believe a mere laminated identification tag bestows upon them dominion over the entire globe. I meticulously examined the document, captured it with my camera, and filed it within the designated directory labeled HOA Evidence Escalating Foolishness. Subsequently, I promptly transmitted it directly to Rachel. 10 minutes elapsed, and my phone rang. There was no preamble, no polite pleasantries. Milo, she stated, her voice direct. I've just reviewed it and I have a question, she continued. Are these individuals intoxicated? To a medically significant degree? It's indeterminate, I responded. It could stem from overconfidence, sheer ignorance, or a combination of both. She released a sharp exhalation. This now constitutes harassment, legal harassment, and we shall address it as such. I could discern the rapid, energetic sound of typing emanating from her end. I'm incorporating this into the existing draft of the criminal complaint, she informed me. We now have documented instances of trespass, unauthorized access to a secured entryway, fabricated inspection claims, and a written acknowledgement of intended future unlawful entry. Would you prefer to dispatch another correspondence? Oh, I'm preparing to transmit far more than a mere letter, she retorted. I'm dispatching a compendium, essentially a legal projectile. Excellent, she added, pausing. Then her tone shifted to a low, menacing register, the kind of inflection that lawyers adopt when they detect an opening. Milo, this woman is not merely imprudent. She is fixated. They will not cease their actions until compelled to do so. I understand, I replied. Prepare yourself, she cautioned, because this degree of escalation typically foreshadows physical action on their part. She was precisely correct. The irrefutable evidence materialized the following morning, not enclosed within an envelope or a letter, but in the form of electronic surveillance. I emerged to inspect the gate, a mug of coffee in hand, and froze mid-stride. Positioned directly across from my property boundary, on the HOA-controlled side of the intangible dividing line, stood a brand-new camera mounted on a tripod. Its design was sleek and black, weather-resistant, boasting high-resolution capabilities, and it was aimed directly at my driveway, as if documenting an exotic species for a nature program. It did not belong to me. It was not a county asset. It did not belong to anyone authorized to place it there. This was HOA equipment, erected in plain sight and facing my residence as if they held exclusive broadcasting rights. I observed it for a prolonged moment before stepping directly to the fence, leaning forward and gazing squarely into the lens. I refrained from shouting, from uttering any expletives, denying them the satisfaction. I simply raised my hand and offered the camera a slow, deliberate gesture of defiance. Then I turned and ascended the incline with my coffee. Behind me, the tripod remained stationary, unperturbed, unyielding, yet a boundary had irrevocably been crossed. Letters were one matter, but establishing surveillance on a private thoroughfare constituted a declaration of hostilities. And I harbored no intention of conceding defeat. Individuals who covet authority they do not possess find it impossible to resist the illusion of it. They perceive a badge and aspire to one. They observe a uniform and procure it. They encounter a sign that appears official and are drawn to it like insects to a bug zapper. Therefore, upon observing that tripod-mounted camera aimed at my gate, unconcealed, unsubtle, and utterly unashamed, I apprehended precisely the nature of the individuals I was confronting, the sort who require validation of their importance, and they are the most susceptible to deception. That afternoon, having completed my fence inspections and attended to Daisy's needs, I proceeded to the barn workshop. From its confines, I retrieved a sheet of laminated plastic, a remnant from my prior engagements in contract inspection work. It featured bold, striking, reflective lettering. Employing a marker and a printer, I fashioned a new placard, a remarkably official-looking placard. Engineering survey in progress. Joint initiative. County and HOA. Authorized access exclusively. No disturbances permitted. Its appearance was sufficiently authoritative to mislead a significant portion of the county's population, yet sufficiently ambiguous that no legitimate inspector would associate themselves with it. It was the perfect lure. I procured 2 vividly orange traffic cones from storage, a folding measuring tape, and an antiquated metal toolbox. The toolbox was devoid of any contents, merely adding dead weight. However, from a distance, it conveyed an impression of significance. Subsequently, I made my way to the gate, unlocked it, and positioned the cones just inside the property line. The fabricated sign was placed prominently at the forefront. The toolbox rested to the side, slightly ajar, creating the appearance that someone had momentarily stepped away from their task. Beneath the gravel, a miniature motion sensor was discreetly installed, directly linked to my mobile device. A trap, a psychological gambit, an irresistible draw for curiosity. And my wait was not protracted. That evening, after the sun descended beyond the hill and the sky adopted a purple hue, my phone vibrated. Motion detected. Gate Zone 1. I accessed the live camera feed. The white HOA utility vehicle had reappeared. The identical vehicle, exhibiting the same cautious behavior, creeping slowly up the incline as a predator might cautiously approach its prey. They parked in the designated turnout just beyond my property limit. The engine remained running, the headlights were extinguished, and 2 doors opened. It was them once more. the individual with the buzz cut and the thin-rimmed spectacles. My preferred duo. Buzzcut approached first, sauntering directly towards the sign as if it were an invitation. He leaned in, squinting, tracing the inscription with his finger. Thin glasses loitered behind him, craning his neck as if attempting to ascertain some critical detail. Buzzcut then turned, uttered something inaudible to me, and Thin Glasses nodded. It was at that juncture that he stepped beyond my fence line, initiating a clear violation that was captured by all 3 cameras. He produced his mobile device and commenced recording the fabricated survey setup as if he had stumbled upon irrefutable federal evidence. My motion sensor triggered once more. Pressure detected, footprint, gate zone 1, timestamped, GPS tagged, legally unassailable. My bait had proven effective. Buzzcut moved about the cones with exaggerated importance, staging a performance of official duty. Thin Glasses focused his attention on scanning the QR code affixed to the sign. This QR code was linked to the Douglas County Property Registry website, displaying my parcel number, my ownership documentation, and the defined jurisdictional boundaries. I observed a palpable transformation in his countenance. Confusion gave way to apprehension, then dawning realization, and finally a palpable sense of dread. Not the physical kind, but a bureaucratic terror, the kind of fear a person experiences when they abruptly comprehend they might be situated in an unauthorized location, all while being digitally documented from multiple vantage points. He uttered a brief statement to Buzzcut. Buzzcut stiffened. Both individuals surveyed their surroundings, scanning the tree line as if anticipating my emergence, perhaps armed with a badge or a firearm. They retreated with haste, their earlier swagger entirely absent. The utility vehicle descended the incline rapidly, dislodging gravel in its wake, while I remained on my porch, savoring a glass of whiskey and observing the entire sequence unfold in pristine high definition. Right into it, I mused aloud. Precisely as I anticipated. But the most gratifying aspect is that this was not the conclusion. 2 days later, in the early morning hours, I exited my residence to mend a dislodged rail in the southern pasture, only to observe a vehicle parked near the furthest gate. It was neither an HOA vehicle nor a sheriff's patrol car, but a nondescript gray sedan projecting an air of officialdom, or at least attempting to. A man clad in a windbreaker stood beside it, feigning an intense study of the gravel shoulder as if it were a crime scene. The rear of his jacket bore the inscription, County Infrastructure Inspection, albeit with noticeably uneven lettering. The jacket appeared new, and his boots were the most impeccably clean footwear I had ever witnessed on an alleged field inspector. He approached my gate, rattled it, surveyed his surroundings, and then produced a measuring wheel, mirroring Buzzcut's earlier actions. It was at that precise moment that the pieces clicked into place. The HOA was no longer merely probing the limits. They were escalating, advancing their agenda, and amplifying their deceptions. Each subsequent maneuver involved an additional layer of duplicity, a more audacious disguise. And this individual, this purported inspector, represented the next strategic move on Karen West's chessboard. What he remained unaware of, what he could not possibly comprehend, was that he was on the precipice of committing his most significant miscalculation yet. Because this time, my intention was not merely to document his actions, it was to expose them. From the instant I noticed the gray sedan, an unsettling feeling of impropriety permeated my thoughts. Genuine county inspectors do not operate anonymous sedans. Their vehicles are typically pickup trucks, coated in dust, equipped with tool racks, bearing faded decals, and exhibiting the patina of years of diligent service. Trucks that emanate the aroma of exertion, diesel fuel, and accumulated paperwork. However, this sedan possessed the appearance of having been freshly acquired from a rental facility, and the man standing adjacent to it exuded an aura of nervousness, an excessive fastidiousness, an almost rigid demeanor, and an almost palpable sense of caution. He wore a windbreaker with the words County Infrastructure Inspection emblazoned across the back, yet the lettering was demonstrably askew. The edges of the applique still displayed loose threads, suggesting it had been hastily applied by a sewing machine in the early hours of the morning. He furtively glanced down the road, then upwards towards my gate, and then back at the sedan. It was the behavior of a man engaged in a rehearsal. I remained concealed behind a cluster of pine trees, observing him as he extracted a measuring wheel from the trunk. Such an action is typically undertaken with the specific intention of projecting an image of authority. And when one feels compelled to project authority, it suggests an absence thereof. He approached my gate and gave it a shake. It remained resolutely unyielding. The deadbolt clanked resonantly, its echo reverberating across the tranquil morning air. He uttered an indistinct remark and then proceeded to run the measuring wheel along the gravel shoulder, meticulously jotting down observations on a clipboard. Right, I mused internally. The performance has concluded. I emerged from the concealment of the trees and emitted a whistle. It was a sharp, piercing sound, reminiscent of the methods employed in earlier times to attract a suspect's attention. He started violently, nearly dropping his clipboard. "Good morning," I stated, my voice as placid as chilled creek water. "Are you in search of something?" He straightened, cleared his throat, and adopted a profoundly exaggerated deep voice. "Yes, sir. County inspection. We have received reports indicating this road may be in contravention of public access safety regulations." I allowed the silence to extend, giving him ample time to absorb its weight. I acknowledged. "And you are?" He presented a laminated identification card, if one could even dignify it with such a designation. It lacked any holographic elements, any raised embossing, or a photograph. It bore only his name, Landon Whitaker, and a rudimentary clip art depiction of the county logo. I raised an eyebrow. "Do you possess a business card?" He hesitated. I am not authorized to dispense those." "Indeed," I responded. I retrieved my mobile device and dialed a number ingrained in my muscle memory. "Sheriff Harland." He answered on the second ring. "Sheriff," I announced, ensuring my voice was sufficiently audible for the fabricated Whitaker to overhear. "Are you dispatching an inspector to my vicinity today?" A brief pause ensued on the line, followed by a subdued chuckle. "No." "Do you have an unexpected visitor?" "Yes." He identifies himself as Landon Whitaker. Claims to be with county infrastructure. The distinct sound of typing emanated from the speaker. "There is no Whitaker on our payroll," Harlan stated, his tone subsequently sharpening. "Milo, detain him there. I am dispatching a deputy immediately." I lowered my phone and offered the fabricated inspector a smile. "You should take a seat, Landon," I advised. "You're about to undergo a genuine inspection." He did not comply by sitting. He offered no verbal response. He fled. Not a casual jog, not even a brisk walk. He ran. He sprinted back towards the sedan, narrowly avoiding a tumble over his own footwear, scrambled inside, ignited the engine, and accelerated away with such velocity that he generated a cloud of dust dense enough to suffocate a horse. I committed the license plate number to memory, although, truthfully, it was unnecessary. The surveillance cameras had captured it. 10 minutes later, a deputy arrived, a young man named Barnett. A decent individual, though visibly nervous, like a deer caught in the headlights of a hunting season. I provided him with the still images, a photograph of the spurious badge, and the license plate number. "We'll run it," he assured me. Rachel, however, accomplished the task with greater celerity. That afternoon, she contacted me with an intonation I had not previously encountered, a blend of profound satisfaction and palpable indignation. "Milo," she declared, "the sedan is registered to Dennis West, and who, pray tell, is Dennis West?" "The spouse of Karen West," she clarified. "The president of the HOA." I emitted a protracted low exhalation. So, that was the extent of it. The HOA president herself has escalated this matter into felony territory. Impersonating a public official is not merely ill-advised. It is an offense carrying significant prison ramifications. Rachel continued, "I'm adding this to the existing complaint file. We now have documented trespass, unauthorized access, attempted regulatory impersonation, fraud, harassment, and a clearly discernible pattern of escalating belligerence. And what of Landon, the purported inspector?" I inquired. "Not his real name," she stated. We will subpoena the DMV records in due course. She then appended one further observation. Milo, with utmost seriousness, she conveyed, her voice soft, this is no longer a mere HOA dispute. This is a criminal matter. Exercise extreme caution. I am, I affirmed. Yet, deep within, I harbored the conviction that this was far from the zenith of their actions. The most disquieting aspect was their persistent belief that they retained the upper hand. This delusion, more than anything else, convinced me that the true tempest was only just beginning to gather. The taillights of the sedan had barely vanished over the crest of the rise when I commenced my deliberate trek towards the gate. Each step was measured, my breathing steady, embodying the kind of tranquility a person attains only after years of discipline, learning not to pursue a fleeing suspect unless one is absolutely certain they are not accompanied by reinforcements. Daisy trotted along beside me, her ears alert, her tail held stiffly, not emitting any barks, but merely observing the surroundings. That canine always possessed an uncanny ability to discern when something was amiss. I reached the gate, and my gaze fell to the ground. There it was. The imposter inspector had evidently dropped something. A small black notebook lay partially obscured in the gravel, a consequence of his panicked departure and the frantic spinning of tires. The initial page was creased, its corner torn, the kind of damage that only occurs when an individual flees in extreme haste. I crouched down and carefully retrieved it, handling it with the same meticulous care I would have employed when dealing with evidence during my tenure as a law enforcement officer. The cover bore a cheaply printed glossy impression. Larkspur Hills, HOA Field Assessment Notes. Field assessment, I muttered derisively. How quaint. I opened it. What I discovered within caused me to freeze, my breath catching in my throat. The handwriting, while not meticulously neat, was confidently inscribed. It contained dates, times, rudimentary sketches of the property, arrows indicating my land, and beneath one entry, penned with forceful pressure, almost as if etched into the page, read, Karen requires this road under HOA jurisdiction by the end of the month. Another line stated, obtain gate code from maintenance contact. I felt my jaw clench involuntarily. So that's how they managed to gain entry. Someone divulged my access code. Either an individual employed by the HOA or someone they contracted. I turned the page. Further annotations followed, including measurements of my driveway, diagrams of the gate, and even commentary regarding visibility impediments and gradient-related hazards. These were the very same words I had overheard their patrolman muttering on the night of their trespass. However, one particular line resonated more profoundly than all the others. If owner resists, escalate. Utilize county angle. County angle, the notation clarified, implying the impersonation of an inspector. This revelation confirmed that the individual fleeing from me was not merely an overzealous HOA volunteer. He was an integral component of Karen's meticulously crafted scheme. I continued to read. Towards the rear of the notebook, a rudimentary checklist was presented. Measure drive slope, photograph barn, record gate code. Document hazardous access point. Prepare report for Karen. And then, circled with emphatic repetition, was the word checkpoint. As Karen dictates, yes. A chilling sensation crawled across my skin. A checkpoint erected on my private road, on my privately owned land. This was no longer a matter of paranoia or an unwarranted exaggeration. They were actively planning to establish an actual checkpoint directly upon my property line. I surveyed my surroundings. The deserted road, the silent pines, the manner in which the sunlight illuminated the gravel. Everything appeared utterly normal. However, the notebook clutched in my hand transformed the entire scene into something entirely different. It felt like a battlefield, meticulously surveyed in preparation for an impending assault. I gently closed the notebook and slipped it into the inner pocket of my jacket. This was precisely the kind of tangible evidence that would profoundly impress a judge. Physical, handwritten, directly indicative of intent. Not conjecture, not hearsay. Ink, paper, and undeniable purpose. I retrace my steps back to the house, Daisy trotting faithfully by my side, her nose brushing against my leg in her characteristic manner when she sensed my mind engaged in intense deliberation. Within the confines of the barn office, I placed the notebook upon the desk. I meticulously photographed every single page, front and back. Subsequently, I initiated a call to Rachel. She answered on the very first ring. "Milo, is everything in order?" "No," I replied, "but their situation is about to deteriorate significantly." "Elaborate," she commanded. I recounted the details of the pursuit, the gray sedan, the spurious badge, the man's panicked flight, and then divulged the existence of the notebook. A profound silence descended upon her end of the line for a considerable duration. When she finally spoke, her voice was a low, guttural growl. "Milo, this is invaluable. This constitutes a felony admission. This is a conspiracy. This is premeditated misconduct." "I am aware," I stated. "You must scan every page immediately and transmit it to me. Preserve the original securely. We will also provide a copy to Harland." "I am already initiating the scanning process," I responded. Another pause ensued. "Milo." "Yes?" "Exercise extreme caution. Individuals who resort to impersonating county officials rarely cease their activities solely at the documentation stage." "I am aware of that," I confirmed. "I secured the notebook within my gun safe, not out of apprehension that they might breach its security and abscond with it, but because an undeniable intuition suggested this was merely the nascent stage of a much larger conflict, and my intuition proved correct, because the subsequent morning they eschewed dispatching another fraudulent inspector. They did not issue a letter. They did not even deploy a patrol vehicle. They sent something far more insidious. They attempted to impede a delivery truck on my private road. And for the first time since this entire ordeal commenced, an individual other than myself was unwillingly drawn into the vortex of their irrationality. It was slightly past 9 o'clock in the morning when my phone rang. Initially, the number was unfamiliar, but the voice on the other end belonged to someone I recognized with familial familiarity. Hank, my reliable hay hauler for nearly 15 years, a man who had navigated through blizzards, flash floods, and wildfire smoke so dense it felt palpable. However, I had never before heard him sound quite like this. "Milo," he stated, his voice strained with evident distress, "I'm presently immobilized at the base of your road." I straightened instinctively. "Immobilized? What exactly do you mean by immobilized?" "Well," he began, "there are, in fact, 2 HOA individuals clad in reflective vests down here. They've obstructed the entrance with traffic cones. They're claiming I cannot proceed unless I possess some form of resident permit, and they are meticulously photographing my license plate." My stomach plummeted. "Oh, hell." "This is not amusing, Milo," Hank insisted. "They approached my truck directly, informing me that I was obstructing an inspection zone. One of them even threatened to contact the sheriff on me." "Of course they did," I muttered. "The classic tactic of a bully. Intimidate someone who is unaware of their rights." "All right, Hank. Listen to me very carefully," I instructed. "Remain within your vehicle. Do not move it. Refrain from engaging with them, and under no circumstances should you touch anything they place on the ground. Are you coming?" "I'm already grabbing my keys." I terminated the call, affixed my body camera to my shirt, and exited the premises. The sky above the ridge was a pristine, unblemished blue, almost too clear, the kind of crisp, vibrant morning where any anomaly stands out with jarring prominence like a stain on a white garment. Daisy emitted a single sharp bark as if to offer a word of encouragement. "Proceed." I entered my truck and began my descent down the hill, each curve in the road revealing a progressively broader panorama of the valley below. As I drew nearer, I discerned their presence. 2 HOA patrol officers, accompanied by a single SUV and 3 traffic cones, and conspicuously lacking any legitimate authority. They had established a makeshift checkpoint precisely at the ingress of my private road, as if they were regulating traffic flow into a military installation rather than engaging in trespass on a rancher's driveway. Hank's livestock trailer was positioned awkwardly, trapped between their cones and their puffed-up display of bravado. I could observe him leaning out the window, his face flushed with a mixture of bewilderment and anger. And I halted my vehicle at a sufficient distance to ensure comprehensive recording by my front-facing dash camera, then disembarked slowly, deliberately, my boots making purposeful sounds on the gravel. Both men turned their attention towards me. One appeared to be approximately 25 years of age, his aviator sunglasses excessively shiny, his vest impeccably clean, embodying the archetype of a young man who still believed that mere posture conveyed power. The other held a clipboard, his chin elevated as if he had anticipated this precise moment his entire life, the moment someone would challenge his fabricated jurisdiction. I activated my body camera. "Gentlemen," I stated, my voice calm and even, "kindly vacate my road." The individual with the clipboard raised a hand, palm outward, as if directing traffic at a theme park. "Sir, this is an active safety inspection zone. We are advising all vehicles to remain stationary until we complete our assessment." "Assessment," I repeated. "Of what precisely?" "The ingress and egress gradient of Flynn Drive," he responded, as if reciting from a script. Aviators took a step forward. "Sir, you are advised to maintain your distance. We are authorized to—" I interrupted him. "Authorized by whom?" They exchanged hesitant glances. "Right?" I pressed. "I thought so." I proceeded directly past them towards Hank's truck. "Are you all right?" I inquired. Hank nodded. "Much better now that you're here. I was just about ready to drive right over your blasted cones." I turned back to address the two patrolmen and retrieved a folded map from my glove compartment. It was the county parcel map, the one Rachel had insisted I print 20 copies of for precisely these types of eventualities. I lightly tapped it against the chest of the clipboard-wielding individual. "This," I declared, "is my property. That road, every single inch of it, is my private domain. You are trespassing, obstructing a lawful delivery, and impersonating an authority figure." Aviators scoffed. "Sir, we are members of the Larkspur Hills Safety Division. We possess regulatory authority." "You are welcome to regulate your own immediate neighborhood," I retorted sharply. They shifted uneasily, their gazes flickering towards the cameras conspicuously mounted around the gate. They were acutely aware that they were being recorded. They simply did not yet comprehend the extent to which they were already ensnared. The clipboard holder finally exhaled, his shoulders slumping. "Fine," he muttered. "We will relocate the cones." "See that you do," I instructed. They unceremoniously shoved the traffic cones aside, their faces a mixture of irritation and shame, and trudged back toward their imposing SUV. Hank, leaning out the passenger window, offered a sardonic suggestion. "Should I just run one of them over next time?" "Tempting, but no," I replied, choosing diplomacy for the moment. "Let's give the legal system a fair shot. For now." As Hank maneuvered the vehicle back up the dusty track, the HOA's own SUV retreated in the opposite direction, its departure swift and devoid of any lingering pride. They knew they had been defeated this round. Back at the house, I meticulously edited the captured video footage, saved it, and then uploaded the segment to a secure online archive. On a sudden impulse, I changed the privacy setting to public. The title I chose was HOA Attempts to Block Lawful Delivery on Private Property. Watch the Fallout. Within a matter of hours, the video had garnered 10,000 views. By the stroke of midnight, that number had swelled to 40,000. The comments flooded in, a torrent of opinions. Some expressed their support with cheers, others found it amusing, and many echoed my own unspoken thoughts. These gentlemen have no inkling of whom they are antagonizing. And indeed they did not. Not then, but soon, very soon, they would learn. Because the following morning, my digital mailbox contained an unexpected communiqué. Not a conciliatory message, nor a veiled threat, but a formal summons. The HOA was demanding my presence before their disciplinary board. That was the definitive moment I understood they were not backing down. They were actively escalating the conflict. The morning after the hay incident dawned with a peculiar, unnerving stillness, the kind that instills a knot of apprehension in your stomach. The sky was a bit too clear, the air unnaturally placid, with not a whisper of wind rustling through the pine trees. It was the sort of morning that made even the birds hesitate before breaking the silence. I was seated at the porch table, slowly sipping a mug of strong black coffee, when Daisy, my faithful companion, trotted up, her ears pricked forward and her nose actively twitching. She had detected something. I followed her, allowing her to lead me down toward the ridge that offered a commanding view of the valley below. From this vantage point, one could observe a considerable portion of the lower slope, including the unmarked boundary that separated my private access road from the HOA's ostentatious domain. It was then that I discerned it, not a conversation, nor an angry outburst, but the distinct murmur of radio communication, clipped, brief, and quiet, yet not quiet enough to remain unnoticed. Someone was down there, communicating via handheld radio, and they were remarkably close. I crouched instinctively behind a dense juniper bush, straining to listen. The first voice was distinctly male, high-pitched and reedy, suggestive of a man who habitually wore spectacles. Karen stated the cones remain in place until she personally arrives. No exceptions. The second voice was unfamiliar to me. It was older, laced with impatience, perhaps belonging to someone in their mid-50s. What is it she desires, precisely? We already delivered the warning to the truck yesterday. Then, the crucial detail emerged. The same reedy voice spoke again. She intends to deploy the entire setup today. The tent, the barricades, all the signage. She insists the checkpoint be fully established before he descends the hill. Before I descend the hill. My stomach lurched, tightening with a visceral dread. My jaw clenched so hard I feared a tooth might fracture. They were not merely posturing. They were not testing the limits of the situation. They were actively planning to commandeer my road, openly and without pretense, by establishing a fully operational, and I inwardly groaned, God help me, HOA checkpoint. The older gentleman spoke once more. She presumes the sheriff will not intervene. The reedy voice emitted a nervous chuckle. Karen asserts that if the sheriff appears, she will classify it as community enforcement. She wisely stated, it is simpler to offer an apology after the fact than to request authorization beforehand. A slow, familiar warmth spread up my spine. This was not mere confidence. It was an unyielding obsession. And individuals like her, individuals who perceive themselves as cornered, do not retreat. They dig in their heels and escalate. Then, a third voice interjected, low and tinged with irritation, unmistakably hers. Karen West. She must have been close enough for her radio microphone to capture her utterance. Listen closely. He does not dictate the regulations. We do. I expect that checkpoint to be operational within the hour. Cones, barricades, safety tape. I want everything to appear legitimate. Should he attempt any interference, we will document it. If he displays aggression, we will contact the sheriff immediately. Understood? Yes, ma'am, replied the reedy voice. Understood, the older man acknowledged. Karen's voice, sharper this time, declared, he will not intimidate us any further. By the time this ordeal concludes, Flynn Drive will be under HOA governance, regardless of his personal preferences. My hand involuntarily balled into a fist. She had transcended mere trespassing, impersonating officials, and disrupting deliveries. She was orchestrating an unlawful confiscation, a sham police checkpoint operated by unqualified HOA volunteers armed with clipboards and inflated self-importance. I retreated from the ridge, moving slowly and silently, Daisy mirroring my every cautious step. I took a deep, steadying breath. Then I retrieved my phone and dialed a number I had not anticipated needing to use more than once within a single week. Sheriff Harland, he answered promptly. Milo, is everything all right? No, I stated, my voice grave. Not even remotely. What has transpired? I glanced back toward the slope. In the distance, I could already discern figures moving. 2 men were laboriously hauling a folding table and a stack of plastic barricades. They are constructing something, I reported, right on my property line as we speak. Constructing what precisely? I gritted my teeth. A checkpoint. A profound silence ensued, followed by Harlan's response, his voice hard as granite. A what? You heard me correctly, I confirmed. Tent, barricades, cones, radios, clipboards, the entire ensemble. And Sheriff, she is arriving. She is bringing the entire roadblock operation. What are they claiming this time? A safety inspection? No, I corrected. This time it is about control. Unabashed control. I perceived a subtle shift in Harlan's breathing, akin to a man straightening himself after leaning over. Milo, do you possess substantiation? I overheard them on the radio. I have visual confirmation. They are establishing it as we speak. He refrained from swearing, a rarity for Harlan, but I detected the faint exhalation of a man confronting a serious issue. Milo. Yes? Remain exactly where you are. Do not engage. I am en route. I hesitated for a moment before adding the crucial instruction I knew was necessary. Sheriff, please bring the prosecutor. He paused. The prosecutor? Indeed. Bring him and instruct him to bring any necessary documentation for immediate charges. Milo, are you anticipating significant trouble? I am anticipating, I said slowly, that Karen is about to commit an act of such profound foolishness that it will etch her name into infamy. Another pause. Then Harlan replied, Very well, I will bring him. And Sheriff, yes, please come with haste. She is on the verge of crossing a boundary that cannot be uncrossed. With the call concluded, I slipped the phone back into my pocket and surveyed my road. The HOA's actions were no longer spontaneous, they were deliberate. And as the first corner of their orange canopy lifted in the breeze, a clear realization dawned upon me. I was not the one walking into their carefully laid trap. They were the ones walking directly into mine. As I stepped outside, the wind had indeed intensified, carrying sounds up the hill, voices, the clatter of metal against metal, the unfurling snap of plastic barricades. They were truly proceeding with their plan. I walked towards the ridge, Daisy close at my heels, her tail held rigidly, her nose still twitching. From my elevated position, everything was now unequivocally clear, and with a profound sense of inevitability, I let out a laugh. It was not a joyous sound, but rather a release of disbelief mingled with the dark humor of someone who had witnessed an excess of foolishness to be genuinely surprised. Down at the foot of my road, precisely at the property line, the HOA had erected their supposed masterpiece. Checkpoint 1, HOA access control, authorized vehicles only. A folding canopy tent flapped erratically in the wind. Two individuals, clad in HOA security shirts, paced with the self-importance of mall cops guarding a national treasure. Barricades had been arranged to form a rudimentary lane, and traffic cones, like the haphazard efforts of a drunken man, stretched across the gravel. And at the epicenter of this elaborate charade stood Karen West, her arms crossed, sunglasses perched on her nose, her chin held high as if surveying a vanquished dominion. She was smiling, a genuine smile. That was the precise moment I knew she believed herself victorious. Excellent, because that level of overconfidence inevitably breeds carelessness. I secured my body camera, confirmed its battery charge, and commenced my descent down the hill. My pace was slow, deliberate, and measured. With each step closer, my stomach settled and my breathing deepened. Anger had dissipated. When a person witnesses their adversary confidently stride into a trap of their own making, anger evaporates, leaving only a quiet patience. The instant Karen spotted me, she turned to her supposed security detail, uttering something that caused them both to snap to attention like toy soldiers. One of them raised a hand, projecting, "Sir, this area is restricted." "Save it," I responded, my voice firm. I walked directly to the first barricade and read the inscription aloud, ensuring the audio was captured clearly by my camera and microphones. Checkpoint 1, HOA access control. I met their gaze and both men visibly flinched. Karen, with a strut that suggested a personal vendetta against the very earth beneath her heels, sauntered over. "Mr. Flynn," she chirped, her smile stretched unnaturally wide, "we are merely here to ensure safety." "Safety," I echoed, my tone flat. "On my road?" "This road impacts our community," she asserted. "Your continued refusal to cooperate has left us with no alternative. Henceforth, access will necessitate an HOA pass." She rummaged in her purse and produced a laminated card, my name misspelled as Milo Phylan, which she extended as if bestowing a great favor. I did not accept it. "You have now officially engaged in criminal trespass," I stated, my voice low and steady, "and unlawful restriction of movement." "Oh, do cease," she scoffed. "No one is being apprehended." I tilted my head slightly. Not yet. I shifted my stance, subtly asserting my lack of intimidation, and raised my phone. "You wish to enforce regulations?" I inquired. "Excellent. Enforce this." I pressed the record button. "Karen West, you are currently in violation of Colorado Revised Statute 38-5101. You are impeding lawful access to private property and operating an unauthorized checkpoint. Turn that off immediately," she snapped. "No," I replied. That single word seemed to strike her with more force than any physical blow, for in that moment I witnessed it for the first time that day. Fear. Not the frantic kind that prompts flight, but the paralyzing sort that silences speech. She spun around to face her patrolman. "Remove the barricade at once. I do not want him." But she did not complete her sentence, for at that very instant I heard it. Engines. 3 of them ascending the hill. Not the familiar hum of HOA SUVs, nor the rumble of resident vehicles. These were the unmistakable sirens of sheriff vehicles. 2 black and white cruisers, followed by an unmarked sedan, and then, trailing behind them all, a news van bearing the prominent blue lettering of Channel 7. Karen's complexion bleached, not to white, but to a terrifying transparency. She attempted to regain her composure, but her hands trembled visibly as she adjusted her sunglasses. The first deputy to emerge from a cruiser was Cortez, the second was Barnett. Behind them strode the county prosecutor, a compact man in a charcoal gray suit, a folder tucked securely under his arm. He did not walk. He marched with determined purpose. Karen finally found her voice, albeit strained. "Officers, thank goodness you have arrived. Mr. Flynn is interfering with—" "Mom," Cortez interjected, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. "Step away from the barricade." Karen blinked, momentarily stunned. "What?" "We have video evidence, written documentation, and multiple witness testimonies," the prosecutor stated, opening his folder. "You are operating an unauthorized road checkpoint on private property. This constitutes a criminal offense." Karen's mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. I am acting on behalf of the community," she stammered. "This is a standard safety procedure." "No," the prosecutor interrupted, his gaze unwavering. "This is trespass, obstruction, impersonation of regulatory authority, and the unlawful detainment of a commercial vehicle." Her lips quivered. "This is preposterous," she declared. "You fail to comprehend. You should be supporting us. The judge, your judge, is also a member of an HOA." Every deputy froze. Cortez raised an eyebrow, while Barnett winced audibly. The prosecutor simply stared at her. "A judge," he repeated slowly, his voice laced with disbelief, "is a member of an HOA and is therefore expected to contravene the law on your behalf." Karen swallowed hard. The stark realization of her pronouncement, the utter self-sabotage of her position, washed over her. I did not mean—" But it was far too late. The prosecutor nodded discreetly at the deputies. "Place her under arrest." Barnett stepped forward. "Ma'am, please turn around." "No!" she shrieked. "No! You cannot do this! This is my road as well! This is my authority! You cannot—" Her voice cracked, and she reached instinctively for the barricade, as if its flimsy plastic could halt the impending collapse of her world. Cortez gently took her wrist. "Ma'am!" Karen screamed, not with words, but with a guttural cry, the sound a person makes when their carefully constructed fantasy crumbles into dust. Her patrolman took an involuntary step back, dropping their clipboards as if they had suddenly become instruments of contagion. One even muttered, "We did not sign up for this," before a deputy calmly escorted him aside for questioning. Within minutes, Karen was secured in the back of a cruiser, her face flushed crimson, her hair disheveled, still vociferously proclaiming notions of community sovereignty and illegal oppression. The news camera captured every mortifying second. Not that it truly mattered, because the instant her vehicle pulled away, a wave of profound relief washed over me, as warm and comforting as a gentle breeze. It wasn't a feeling of victory, but simply of release. For the first time in weeks, the road felt unequivocally mine again. However, the narrative was far from concluded. The courthouse awaited, and Karen, I suspected, had not yet exhausted her capacity for self-inflicted humiliation. Karen's court date arrived with surprising alacrity. It turns out that when you present the justice system with an irrefutable pile of evidence, meticulously bound with HOA letterhead and adorned with a festive red bow, proceedings tend to accelerate considerably. On the morning of the hearing, the courthouse parking lot was already nearly full. Neighbors, ranchers, and a handful of curious townspeople had gathered, eager for front row seats to what promised to be a spectacular display, and there she was, Karen West, stepping out of a gleaming silver Lexus as if the judge himself would commend her impeccable posture. She wore a navy blue suit that appeared to be straining at the seams, and she was shaking hands with her attorney, a man whose perpetually grim expression suggested he deeply regretted every life choice that had led him to this particular building. I found a seat towards the rear of the courtroom. There was no need to be at the forefront. My role had already been fulfilled. As the judge entered, an immediate hush fell over the room. She was an older woman, her eyes sharp, her silver hair neatly coiffed, exuding an aura of quiet authority that commanded respect. In my years, I had encountered numerous judges, but this one possessed an undeniable intolerance for frivolous proceedings. Karen's attorney commenced his plea with a rambling discourse on community safety, shared responsibility, and unfortunate misunderstandings. The judge raised a hand, a subtle gesture that caused him to falter mid-sentence, as if an invisible switch had been flipped. "Let us be unequivocally clear," the judge stated, her voice precise. "This case is not about intercommunity disagreements. It is about trespass, impersonation, obstruction, and unlawful detainment pertaining to a private roadway, an area clearly outside your stipulated jurisdiction." One could observe the color visibly draining from Karen's face. Rachel, my legal counsel, stepped forward, her words delivered with the crispness of shattering glass. She presented the surveillance footage, the meticulously crafted fake inspector's notebook, the video evidence of trespass, the photographic documentation of the checkpoint setup, the audio recording of the confrontation, copies of the cease and desist letters, and most damningly, Karen's own emails obtained via subpoena. In one of these emails, she had explicitly written, "Flynn Drive will be ours by month's end. Proceed with constructing the checkpoint regardless." As that damning line echoed through the courtroom speakers, a palpable ripple of astonishment swept through the assembled audience. Karen abruptly shot to her feet. "That is taken entirely out of context," she shrieked. "You people fail to grasp the fundamental principles. HOAs govern entire communities. Even judges are members of HOAs. You should be aligning yourselves with me." The judge leaned forward, her eyes hardening like polished steel. "Are you suggesting," she inquired slowly, her voice dangerously calm, "that my personal affiliations obligate me to disregard the law on your behalf?" A silence descended, not the gentle quiet of contemplation, but a profound, oppressive stillness that seemed to suck the very air from the room. Karen's attorney gently tugged at her sleeve, whispering an inaudible plea for her to cease speaking. The judge straightened her papers. "The verdict will follow." And it arrived with a force far exceeding anyone's anticipation. 1 year of probation, 300 hours of community service, a 5-year prohibition from holding any HOA office, mandatory restitution, and a staggering civil penalty of $30,000 levied against the Larkspur Hills HOA for harassment, obstruction, and jurisdictional overreach. The gavel struck once, a clean, decisive sound that sealed the judgment. Karen collapsed into her seat, her gaze fixed ahead, as if her world had not merely broken, but had utterly evaporated. I exited the courtroom before her. There was no necessity to witness her being escorted by deputies once more. Outside, the Colorado sun shone with an intense, sharp brilliance, and the wind carried a sensation I had not experienced in a considerable time: peace. A few days later, I erected a new sign at the entrance to my road. Constructed of sturdy steel, not flimsy plastic, with laser-cut letters securely bolted into a concrete foundation, it read, "Private road, no HOA patrol, no Karen, no exceptions." Floodlights were installed on both sides, a preventative measure should any confusion arise again. Life gradually resumed its familiar rhythm. Fence inspections, early morning excursions, Daisy's futile but enthusiastic pursuit of rabbits, and sunrise coffee on the porch. One afternoon, Hank arrived with another substantial delivery of hay, ascending the hill. He slowed his vehicle as he approached the new sign, tipped his hat in my direction, and called through the open window, "Are you accepting applications for security personnel yet?" I grinned in response. "Only if you come equipped with a flamethrower." He laughed heartily as he drove up the remainder of the drive, and for the first time in many weeks, the peace I felt seemed not temporary, but earned. It felt permanent. It felt like home.